Hi, I'm Cory Driver, and this is Moving Forward. So today we get to talk about Matthew 16 and Jesus' teaching in the region of Caesarea Philippi. Now, context is always important in interpreting Bible, but especially important in passages like these. When the author gives you that bit that something happens in a specific place, we should pay attention. So in Caesarea Philippi, just essentially right there at the base of Mount Hermon, is a grotto, a cave. And out of this cave flows a little river. If you've ever been there, it's lovely hiking. There's a nature preserve there to this area, to this day. And it's beautiful. But the things that happen there were not always beautiful. So in about year 14 of the Common Era, this place is renamed Caesarea Philippi. But prior to that, it had been called Panias, the city of Pan, or the area of Pan. And that is because worship there was devoted to the Greco-Roman god Pan. And worship looked something like this, even back into the Canaanite Greco-Roman times in the area. This area had this cave with this river that flowed out of it, and it is this passageway to the underworld, a sort of gate of Hades, and that'll be important later. But one of the many places that are sort of this gate to Greco-Canaanite religious understandings of the underworld, to the land of the dead. And so people come here to worship Pan among other gods and to beg for their life. So the theory is that some of the gods just need a little break, right? The Greco-Canaanite Roman gods just need a little break. And so they're going to take essentially winter off a lot of times and go to the region of the underworld. You're going to take an extended siesta, hibernate a little bit, and then they're going to come back in the springtime, and everything comes back to life, and it's nice, and there's flowers, hooray. And so a sign that the gods have returned. Okay, whatever. That's not what we think, but fine. But the worship that goes on there is meant to revive gods, to ask them to come back. And it is, in a word, kind of nasty. So there's a lot of sexual stuff. A lot of it involves animals and humans. It's really gross. And it is folks just begging for another year of life. So they're asking these gods that have the power to come back from the dead, to not consign humans to the dead that year. So it's just essentially people screaming, begging, please don't let me die this year. I'll have sex with a goat if it will excite you, oh dead God, to come back to the life to protect me. Should have had a content warning at the beginning. It's really nasty. And so it's this worship of dead gods and begging for life rather than death. And so it's kind of a weird place for a Jewish rabbi to take his students, right? But nonetheless, Jesus is here in the realm of Caesarea Philippi, right at the gate of Hades, and that really, really matters. And so Jesus asks his students all of a sudden, who do the people say that I am? And so the answers are John the Baptist, or Elijah, or Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets come back from the dead. These are all people who have died, John the Baptist very recently, but who have come back to life after being in the dead. And it is no coincidence that these are the answers that Jesus is getting in this place that's sort of a portal between life and death. And so people are saying oh, he's one of the prophetic greats come back from the dead. And so Jesus says, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And Peter gives this stinging rebuke. Jesus, why are we even here? Peter says, You're the anointed one. A lot of translations will say Messiah or Christ here, but I think it's important we read this as anointed one, the Son of the living God. Peter is grossed out. Why are we even here in this place of death and begging fake dead gods for life? This is messed up. You are the anointed one, who scripture says will not be allowed to see death or decay. And you're the Son of the living God, not like these fake gods that are dead, that people are crying to, that people are having like these wicked, gross sex things to wake up from the death. No way. That's not who you are. Jesus really likes this answer and says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah," right? You are to be called Petros, or little rock, or pebble, which is nice. It's cute. And on this rock, I will build my ecclesia, right? On this rock, which is not what Jesus has just called Peter. That really matters. But presumably pointing to Mount Hermon, or even just the rock right on top of the worship site of Panias, of the gate of Hades, right? Jesus says, I'm going to build my community, not in any sense a physical church building or a synagogue or anything like that, though there is a really neat synagogue just down the hill. Not a building, but a community in this place where people beg dead gods for another year of life. Jesus is going to build his community. We should say something about Peter being given the keys to heaven and the power to bind and loosen. Now, this is rabbinic language. It's technical. It means basically just to prohibit or allow things. If I loosen something as a master rabbi that has disciples that pay attention to me, then I permit it. And if I bind something, I prohibit it, and none of my followers would do that thing. And so Peter, we're going to see in the book of Acts, especially Acts 10 and Acts 15, loosening things quite a bit, or coming to understand what binding and loosening might look like in the Jesus community. And Jesus tells Peter that even the gates of Hades will not be able to stand against it. Now, gates in municipal architecture, pre-modern era, are defensive structures meant to keep invading armies out. What Jesus is saying is that his assembled community is going to be raiding Hades, and the gates will not be able to keep them out. The Jesus movement will be against death, and it will not beg dead gods for another year of life. Instead, as Ephesians tells us, Jesus will raid the realms of sin and death and carry captives in his train. Jesus is going to mount a raid into the land of death, through a different gate of Hades, to be sure, through the cross, but is going to rescue and bring people back, both literally and metaphorically, to save people from their sins, to bring them to new life, to be sure, but also to save people from the very realm of death through the coming resurrection. Jesus is announcing his plans here. And if we have ears to hear, we will pick up that Jesus is very provocatively going to a place where death is the subject. But what people are doing is begging dead gods for a little bit of life. And Jesus is going to do very much the opposite, and is going to suffer death willingly in order to steal back the dead, and is begging nothing from anyone. But we'll talk more about that next week. Right now, just know that Jesus plans a raid into the realm of the dead, that he is pleased with Peter and his answer, that Jesus will build his community on the very place where death is negotiated with. And always remember, pay attention to context.